Hello, this is Mark Holmes, editorial director via satellite. We now have another of our Thursday morning conversations and someone I know incredibly well, Caleb Henry, formerly of Via Satellite and Space News, and now at Quilty Analytics. So firstly, welcome, Caleb. Lovely to have you here. And how's life been treating you?
Yeah, good to see you, Mark. It is, well, life for me, I guess, is about the same as everybody else, existing in quarantine, trying to make do with indoor space or maximize indoor space, I guess. But things are good.
Excellent. So we start the conversation by talking about life under lockdown, movies, music, things you've been getting up to. So tell us a little bit about movies or any dramas, any TV that you've really enjoyed. What sort of anything that sort of stands out for you?
Sure. So I typically don't watch a lot of TV. That said, I did rush to get through all of The Office since that was taken off of Netflix at the end of last year. That lit a fire to finish the season, or excuse me, a series that I started in college, and which is now further and further away. But yeah, like 10 years ago, and I just had to get it done. So I finished that. Now I'm watching The Expanse, which is very good.
What's that? Tell me about that. I don't know that one.
The Expanse?
Yeah, I don't
It's
know.
I say that just it's a fairly popular space show.
Oh.
Which I believe Jeff Bezos bankrolled at some point. So now it's on Amazon Prime. Just a really good space show.
Okay, that's probably why I don't have Amazon Prime. I have Netflix, and so that's probably why I haven't heard of it. Which Office is it? The UK or the US version you're watching?
I watched the US version. I suppose I could go and now watch the British version.
The original. That's how Ricky Gervais made his name originally. That was his big comic breakthrough in the UK. Strangely, I've never seen either. So, which is probably, but I know it's a sort of very popular. And what sort of? I mean, we always ask about music as well. Have you been any new music? What's been on like your Spotify playlists or anything like that?
Yeah, so on the music side, it's sort of split into two camps. For work, I suppose because of working from home, I tend to have a lot of like lo-fi music playing in the background. So just like beats and instrumentals and things like that. And then on my free time or if I'm cooking or doing whatever, much more into like hip hop and things like that. So Kendrick, Chance the Rapper, Black Thought, The Roots, Lecrae, Anderson .Paak, those guys.
Okay, so what sort of your, have you been to many sort of concerts, hip hop gigs and stuff?
I haven't actually. I think the last concert I went to was actually with the former Via Satellite managing editor, Veronica McGann, actually watching her and her husband in their band. So
Oh,
King Cobra was the last one I saw.
strangely, that's also one of the last ones I saw as well. I saw it on a separate occasion. It was kind of I don't know if it was the same for you, but it was this. I think it was a place called Slash Run, somewhere in the
Sounds familiar.
and I remember going in there and I looked totally overdressed because it was more of a sort of an indie crowd, and obviously I was the only British person in there, and I said, can I have burger and chips please? And they were sort of looked at me like, what are you doing here? type thing. So it was it was a lot of fun. Did you enjoy Veronica's band? We can have a review and we can tag Veronica. How did you enjoy Teen Cobra?
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I went with my old roommate who's since moved up to Philly. They were playing at a show in Silver Spring, Maryland. I forget the exact venue. It was notable to me because they didn't have the usual DC pricing for food and drinks. Like everything was just way cheaper. It's as if they had missed the entire room. It was great. So, and then the band was obviously fantastic. So it was a lot of fun.
It was. I had a good night out there myself. Aside from music and movies, I mean, I obviously know it's not the easiest time for hobbies and outside interests right now. Have you been sort of when you're not sort of writing space reports and other things? What have you been sort of doing to hobbies wise and outside of satellites?
Yeah, with the winter time, not as much. I was still running during the warmer weather, so I anticipate doing that again, hopefully getting up to doing a few miles, regularly. Um, Play far more video games than I should, also as a consequence of being indoors. I'm trying to read more, so I've got Scott Kelly's book, Endurance, which I'm trying to read through now. It's pretty interesting reading about somebody who spent a year in space with a handful of people. It's, I think, a similar experience to lockdown. So,
I can imagine. So, what before we talk about some satellite space stuff, you mentioned video games, Ed. What's your favorite video game? What's the one that you have a little bit of a weakness for?
my weakness has always been Halo, which, yeah, I'm a big into first person sci-fi shooters. So that one. I've also admittedly been playing a decent amount of Pokemon Shield. That one was a surprise. My girlfriend has a Switch, a Nintendo Switch. So I've been playing that when I see her. But usually it's Halo.
I never knew that, so I've learned something new today. Let's go on to a bit of work stuff, because you've had a bit of a change in career over the last few months. Tell us a little bit, I guess, about from your perspective, the move from Space News to Quilty, and why you were excited to make that move.
Sure. So as you know, I worked for you for a couple of years, and then I worked at Space News for a few years, and late last year joined Quilty Analytics. It's hard to quite put my finger on like one specific catalyst. I mean, honestly, I've known Chris for a very long time and always considered him to be an extremely bright individual. And so the opportunity to join him actually surfaced probably a year or so before I took it. And I kind of just thought about it more over the course of time. And, I'm always interested in gaining new skills in addition to learning new things. And journalism provides a great opportunity to learn new things on a daily basis, and then to get to share that with people. I think what I'm doing now, I get to spend more time digging into a topic as opposed to having the rapid deadlines and turnarounds of daily news writing. And I'll also gain some new skill sets with how to kind of understand the financials of a company and how publicly traded companies are doing, which is also interesting because I've written about them a lot, but I still think there's more to be learned from it, just how to truly understand how they're doing and what they're doing. So those are the things I'm looking forward to.
Are you missing being a journalist yet, or not at all? Because I mean, you were pretty prolific and a pretty big name in this industry with all the stories that you were doing. Do you miss it at all, or are you sort of really, well into the new stuff?
There's a part of me that will miss it. I think there's a part of me that misses every phase of life, whether it was high school or college or whatever, first job, second job. So certainly there's a part of me that's going to miss the access that comes with being a journalist and getting to talk to almost anybody. I think that was really cool. It's probably the thing that I'll miss the most, I imagine. It is fun to publish. It kind of gives you a rush, but I'm also still publishing now, just on a less frequent schedule. We actually just finished a report on radio frequency mapping companies or satellite operators that are trying to map RF from space, which was a really cool topic that I had never really gotten into before. So probably the kind of example I would give of getting to spend a few weeks to a month really digging into a part of the space industry and coming away with a stronger understanding of it.
So what did you learn from that?
I learned that there's a lot of RF mapping satellites going up in the next 2 years, something like 50 to 60. And right now, I think there's just 4 in orbit. It'll go up with the Transporter 1 mission in the coming days. But yeah, a lot more going up in a short period of time.
Okay, wow. What's your, do you know what your next report's going to be on yet? Or now that one's out and done and dusted?
We are contemplating different topics. So I think we'll certainly have something related to LEO broadband. I think we have contemplated something on in-space transportation, kind of last mile activities, stuff like that. Those are two that I know we're talking about. And then there's always earnings season. So once that comes around, it'll be the usual circuit of Viasat, Hughes, Iridium, the companies that Quilty Analytics follows.
Okay, well, let's have a little bit of talk about last year. I mean, because you sort of, I guess you were both divides last year. You were at Space News for a large part of the year, then went to Quilty. I mean, there was a lot of big news sort of last year. I mean, the OneWeb, Intelsat GoGo, Mark Dangberg no longer the CEO of Viasat. Which, when you look back at, I mean, last year was it was a strange year for all of us, both personally and professionally. But when you look at the satellite industry in particular, what sort of, was there any of those stories that really sort of stood out to you, you were surprised by? I'm just sort of curious.
Stories that surprised me last year. I think what was interesting to me, so I hadn't really written about bankruptcies before, and COVID triggered a decent number of bankruptcies in the space industry and around any industry, but there were a number that happened in space, and you can debate whether or not those were purely caused by COVID. I think the writing was on the wall for some, like Intelsat, long before the pandemic came around. But it was really interesting to me to see kind of how companies described the inner workings, things that led up to sort of their financial predicaments. And those kinds of documents, I think, provided a more honest and raw assessment of what was going on behind the scenes than the face that companies usually put forward. So you saw the same thing with Phaser when they filed for administration, the UK equivalent of bankruptcy protection. That was the first time I recall them disclosing having significant hardware issues with their phased array antenna. We didn't know much about the details of how SoftBank was basically spoon feeding money to OneWeb over the course of the year preceding their bankruptcy, things like that. And of course, seeing how much money executives get even when their companies are floundering, that's always interesting. So that was probably my big thing.
Yeah, I mean, the OneWeb was a fascinating, it still is, fascinating story. And, just looking at what happened almost in the week and the build up to satellite and the meetings that didn't take place. And, I sort of wonder, I mean, we hear all about these LEO constellations, and you might be doing a report on it soon. And I mean, is it realistic that you can have a number of these constellations? I mean, where do you think that customers are going to come from? I mean, we talk about, government and, digital divides, but is that going to be enough, do you think, for these constellations? I mean, how do you sort of see the business case for them?
How do I see it for the constellations? Well, I guess each one is different. I feel like the usual answer given at panels, everyone says 2 or 3 will make it, and then there'll be one from China. That is probably a bit more immune to market functions. I would agree with that assessment, but as far as how they're going to approach the market, that I can't say. I'll have a better answer after we do a report. That's for sure. I think that the COVID-induced collapse of the mobility sector with aero and maritime, particularly aero, I think that challenged near-term assumptions for where revenue could come from for constellations. And I think that the antenna issue for having a low-cost user terminal so that the average household could connect to the internet using a mega constellation is still unsolved. So I see a lot of difficulties for constellations. I think there's great interest from the DoD level. I think that there's interest on a universal broadband service level, not only in the US, but also in Europe and in countries around the world like Indonesia, Australia, Brazil. So I definitely would anticipate government being a big supporter of LEO mega constellations, but the rest of it is still in flux, in my opinion.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you, because the big question I always ask is, where are the new customers? I mean, aero and mobility are nothing new. I mean, we were talking about aero actually before you even joined via satellite. That's not necessarily a new market, and maritime definitely isn't. You know, we talk about IoT related markets, you know, whether it's agriculture, healthcare, you know, these other, you know, and some telecoms ones. But, you know, for me, what I want to see is evidence of groundbreaking deals being done for capacity on satellites, a deal that no one sees coming. You think, oh wow, they're actually buying satellite capacity. And I can't, to be honest, I can't remember the last time I saw a deal like that. And I think for LEOs to be a success, you're going to need some of those types of deals that I think you think, wow, that's genuinely groundbreaking. Signing an airline is not genuinely groundbreaking anymore. It was in 2008. Signing a Maersk, Carnival Cruises isn't groundbreaking now. But you know, so that's for me the interesting point is over the course of this decade, you know, will we see some deals like that where you think, wow, that deal's a little bit of a game changer, because we've not seen this type of company invest in satellite before. So that's really what I'm sort of looking to see. And I think as an editor as well, and I much prefer writing good news stories about the satellite industry. I don't like writing about bankruptcies and people losing their jobs, companies going out of business, because often, you know, a lot of people within the companies as well. So, you know, we all want the industry to be successful, and you know, that's it. But it's going to be
certainly.
interesting time. Have you been surprised? I mean, you've been in the industry a few years now, so you're almost at veteran status now. Have you been surprised by like the pace of change, even in your time in the industry?
I think so. Yeah. You know, one of the things that I enjoyed, so I was a journalist for 7 years, and even right at the very beginning, like the first interviews that I was doing, people were telling me that they were seeing more change in those first 2 to 3 years than they had in the past 20 to 30. And I think that that still rings true. I think at every angle that you look, there's something that's new, whether it's launch with new vehicles and reusability, manufacturing with 3D printing, digital payloads, or on the ground with the proliferation of space as a service, ground as a service, and flat panel antennas, and then just the cloud being a part of it. It's sort of, you can't look at any one part of the industry and not see how it's been changed only in the past few years by very radical technology developments. And I think that's what's triggering not only a lot of entrepreneurship, but also a lot of flux and uncertainty about what the best approach is. That's why we have this LEO versus, I know you didn't mention like the big geos, but you know, of course we're aware that companies like Viasat, Eutelsat, Hughes are doubling down on massive geostationary, very high throughput satellites. And so the score is not settled. There's a lot of people proposing answers, and you know, I think that was the fun of being a journalist, is not having to have the answer as to what's the best technology or what's the best market approach or business strategy, but to be able to tell you what people are doing, why they're convinced, and have conviction that their approach is the best one, and showing you how they're putting money and technology and effort behind making their visions happen. So.
I always, one of my standing jokes as a journalist, as an editor, is I think every year I sort of write the industry is in a transitional phase, and I sort of wonder whether it'll ever get out of that transitional phase, whether it's permanently in a transitional phase, because it, you know, we always talk about, well, this is going to be a big couple of years for the industry, say in 2015, 17, 19. Let me ask you, I mean, you've obviously, you've interviewed and you've interviewed a lot of top execs in this industry, covered a lot of I guess most of the companies in one shape or form. Is there sort of one CEO, one company that you really admire, that you think when you look back and you think, well, they've just done such a fantastic job? Is there one you'd point to?
I've always backed away from that question because I feel for journalists and that as a journalist, it was not my place to have a favorite. So um, I don't like pointing the finger at one specific company. That being said, I guess it's pretty like it's no secret that SpaceX has been the one that's challenged everyone to do things differently.
Yeah.
I was just talking about changes in spacecraft, space launch, and ground, and on each of those three legs on which the satellite industry stands, um, they have changed the game. So I would give them a lot of credit for being a change agent and forcing the industry to really reconsider the way things are done. But I would also hedge that with the caveat that everywhere around the industry you have a lot of creativity, and as much as I hate the word innovation, I would use it in this case to say there's a lot of innovation going on in basically every corner of the industry. And I think at this point, there's hardly a company that you can look at. If you're not changing, you're at risk of obsolescence. And I actually think that a lot of that has to do with the fact that the satellite industry as a whole has transitioned from being fixated on broadcast television to internet and to the digital age. So between geospatial intelligence and the desire for broadband connectivity, whether it's narrowband Internet of Things or consumer, uh, all of that moves at a speed that the satellite industry is not used to. Television was spacecraft lasts 15 years, you build it, you launch it, you're good. Now your satellites need to be refreshed. You need to keep pace with something more akin to cell phones. And if you can't do that, then your customers are dissatisfied. They'll go elsewhere. So that I think is the biggest change agent for the industry, and that's causing everyone to reconsider their approach to satellites.
Fantastic. Well, we always like to end on a fun question, so we'll put satellites and space to one side, and we'll go back to hip hop because music's been a big theme of these Thursday morning conversations. So, give us one of your favorite hip hop songs, one that when you're about to write an RF report that will get the juices flowing and ready to go. So, what sort of a good hip hop song you can recommend to all of us?
I'll give you a hip hop song, but perhaps a secret. The album that I wrote the most articles to was actually an electronic one. It's Drink the Sea by a group called the Glitch Mob. And it's about an hour long. It's pretty mellow, but really good. And I used to just set it as a timer. So I'd be like, all right, 1 hour, let's knock this out. We've done the interview. We have all the notes. Let's make it happen. And so I've written hundreds of articles to that album. If I was going to give you a specific song right now, it would probably be Outer Space by Big Crit.
Okay.
That's one that I've just really enjoyed. I find it amusing how many rappers and hip hop artists will reference space in their work. There are some playlists on Spotify of like artists that have mentioned NASA or that mention space, and I've decided to try and listen to some of them. And not all the songs are great, but I think it's a more prevalent theme than people realize.
I think so too. I actually put together a satellite playlist with people that mentioned satellites or artists that mentioned satellites in songs, and there was a lot more when I looked through than I imagined. So it's good to see. Well, Caleb, it's been an absolute pleasure to catch up with you. It doesn't seem 7 years ago that we introduced you via satellite, and obviously it's a real pleasure for us to see you to go on to fantastic new things. We wish you all the best at Quilty Analytics. Sure, you'll do a great job. Sure, your report on the RF report that's just out will be fantastic. So please, our audience, please check that out. I'm sure it will be great. Wish you all the best for 2021. It's obviously a tough year for all of us, but hope you'll have a good year. And as I have to say, seeing your work over the years, it's been really fantastic. You've written some absolutely amazing stories for space news and for via satellite. So you know, I think we're very lucky as an industry to have, you know, talented people like you write for this industry, and really sort of put it in a way that's, you know, that, you know, that where people can access it and it's very easy to read. And you know, so I think you've done a fantastic job. Said a big fan of yours, and looking forward to seeing what you do next. And yeah, we'll leave it there. Thank you for taking part, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Mark. I learned from the best.
Thank you.